Welcome to the Rising Phoenix Rise, Recover and Rebuild podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Demiri, founder of Create Again, Breakup, Mindset and Life Coaching. A large number of people are either thinking about separating, are in the middle of a separation, or are already divorced. Chances are that you're in one of those categories, and if not, know someone that is. While separation and divorce is a normal part of life, there's still a stigma attached, and no one really talks about what it is like to go through this experience, and even less what to do to rebuild yourself. I will be interviewing mothers and business owners, lawyers, and a variety of other people I believe can provide some tips and insight into their lives, and I'm certain you will be able to relate to some of it. If you feel that anything in today's episode resonates with you, make sure to book your 30-minute complimentary session with me today. I would love the opportunity to be part of your rebuilding journey. But now let's get started with today's guest. Hi, lovely humans out there. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Rising Phoenix Rise, Recover and Rebuild podcast. Today is a very special episode, as I'm not only joined by one, but two guests today. Both of them are very successful coaches themselves. Some of you might think, why would I get guests on the show that do similar things to what I do? Well, for me, it's all about collaboration over competition. I believe that we get to work together to make changes in the world, and the more of us there are, the stronger we will be. I can always learn something from these wonderful women, and so can they. But let me introduce them to you. First of all, we have Beck Thompson. She's an award-winning dating and relationship coach, #1 international best-selling author, and the owner and founder of the Relationship Circle, a no BS relationship coach that digs deep, gets to the truth, and supports you in creating new behaviors and patterns that re-energize and revitalize your relationships, as well as create resilience, reconnecting, strong bonds that make you feel whole again. She works with individuals or couples and supports her clients to uncover the real issues and find strategies to reconnect and build relationship resilience. She can help her clients find their way to a more loving, compassionate relationship that remains true through any of life's storms. Drawing on over 10 years in counseling, social work, and life coaching, Beck's no-nonsense, deep approach seeks to understand what's happening for you and your partner now. With honesty, openness, and support, Beck will help her clients re-establish strong bonds that endure life's challenges. And then we also have Alfina Lafaro. Her purpose in life and as a coach is to compassionately educate herself and others in order to create an extraordinary and inspiring future. Over the last 22 years, Alfina has been an educator in a variety of locations and across many different subject areas. Originally qualified as a drama and English teacher, she has also spent 15 years teaching English as second language, Italian, history, and geography. Alfina has also enjoyed success in the field of corporate training. Over the last 8.5 years, Alfina has become a very successful coach and presenter. She is known for her skills in coach training courses and a program called the Relationship Reset. Alfina's experience as an educator has allowed her to seamlessly transition into and to become very successful as a coach. This is due to her belief that education is the most important key to positive and lasting change, whether it be on an individual, organizational, or community scale. Alfina is committed to inspiring her clients to make positive and lasting change in all areas of their life, and in particular in their relationships. She believes that when you get great at relationships, you get great at life, because everything in our life is about relationships, including the relationship we have with our health, money, and most importantly, the relationship with ourselves. Now, fun fact before we start, Alfina is one of my coaches as well. And when I told her that I started following back and that I wanted to invite her as a guest on my podcast, she told me that both of those ladies actually know each other. So welcome, you two. And yes, I had to read all of this because there was just so much. So welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Exactly. Thanks for having us. It's interesting, Jen, the fun fact, I actually met Beck 8.5 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
She was at my first ever live presentation.
Wow,
it was amazing. You would have never known. I didn't know it was your first, did I? That was amazing.
I think that someone told you years later, but yeah, it was my first ever live presentation as a coach, and a presenter. I'd taught for years, but never done that live personal development event. So yeah.
Oh, you nailed it.
That's
Thanks,
awesome.
Can't believe we've gone in the same directions. It's so awesome.
So crazy. And I can't believe it was 8.5 years ago. It's even more crazy.
Yeah, so it's been a long time, I guess. So yes, so I'm so glad that I could bring you together today. So thank you.
Yeah, it's like a mini reunion.
I love those. They're the best. Oh, great. Now, both of you are coaches. Beck, you are a relationship coach, and Alfina, you coach in all areas of life. But as I was saying, the relationship reset is one of the biggest programs that you do in regards to relationships. Now, what made each of you decide to become a coach in the first place?
Well, I became a coach. I think mine was when I first attended that event through EQ, and I was sitting in the audience. I was a social worker before that, and I was sitting in the audience, and they were talking about coaches, and something about it just really spoke to me. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I think the idea, like having worked in counseling where you get people that come to you that aren't ready necessarily and don't want to be there, having people in coaching, they want to be coached and they want to work with you and they want change. And it makes a massive freaking difference to work with someone who is wanting change as opposed to someone who you're kind of pulling along the way.
Yeah.
So I think, something just really spoke to me about the field of coaching, and having met so many coaches, it just inspired me to want to go down that path.
Yeah, I love that. And you are
so partially Alfina. She is part of why I'm here.
That's awesome. Well, so I made the decision to become a coach the year before that. I was at the exact same event. Before I was a presenter of that event, I attended the event. And at the time, I had been burnt out as a teacher. And when I saw the world of coaching, because in my life, there was always always the fork in the road: social work, psychology, counselling, education. And I always chose education because I didn't know how to handle people's emotions, let alone my own when I was younger. And then when I saw coaching, I was like, oh, but we can talk about what they want in the future. And that made me take the course of coaching. Having said that, one of the largest parts about coaching is educating people around who they are, why they do what they do, and what they want. And so the education qualifications and years of experience is what I use the most, interestingly enough. Yeah. So I did it because I saw the massive change it made for me. In just 6 months, turned my life completely around. And I saw how powerful it could be when people learn how to, I don't know how to say this any other way, but then to be an adult. I think coaching helps people learn how to adult well.
Yeah, take responsibility, hey? Yeah.
And ask yourself hard questions as well. Like, you learn so much more about yourself, and then really get the knowledge on how to ask other people the questions to find their answers themselves without giving them all the answers all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I love those stories. Now, let's really dive into it. In your experience over the years, what are the most common challenges that people have or had within their relationships? Alfina, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, you go first, Alfina.
Oh, okay. So in actually, this is really interesting because the relationship reset, the preliminary webinar, is actually the 5 biggest mistakes people make. And so when I was looking at and that was born out of the challenges that me and one of my colleagues saw for years and years. Number one has to be communication. Has to be really poor communication. Strategies that we repeat over and over and over again. And I think the reason we make them is because where do we get educated on how to communicate better? We do what we know. And then when we know something better, we do better. But until we know better, we just keep using what we think is going to work. And usually that's my little saying is it's what we've seen around or what we've been around. And the communication ones, it's usually a repetition. Like I talk about, I know we're going to talk about the silent treatment or stonewalling later on, but like my dad's an Olympic champion. That's like, if there was a sport of silent treatment, my dad once did 3 weeks where he didn't talk. 3 weeks.
Wow.
Champion. Yeah. Whereas my mum
takes some sort of dedication, I feel.
Oh, heck yeah. And my mum is the explode, get it out, and then we're all right afterwards and brush it under the carpet. And so I have 3 sisters. 2 of us are silent treatment kids and 2 of us explode, and we're all happy chappies afterwards kids. And so you really see those patterns. We start looking for these, really see those patterns.
Now I'm gonna put you on the spot here. What was yours? was it the silence treatment or the exploding one?
It's me.
Yes.
Oh, the silent treatment.
Silent.
And I have one up to my dad because I can make it as if you don't exist to me. It's almost like, yeah, it's not this is before I understood that was more disastrous than having an upset. I would just be able to be that silent and silence your energy out of my life as well. It's like literally, yep, it's like you don't exist to me. Really, really interesting. I think, like all things, it's self-preservation strategy.
Yeah.
Can't get hurt if you don't notice the person or they're not there anymore, right? So good question, Chen. Put me on the spot.
And good to know not to get onto your bad side as well. I don't want to get onto your bad side as well.
Well, you'll know if you're there.
I know she's not talking to me.
Well, interesting, because as a result of doing all of this work, I know now like how to have those conversations before I have to get upset, even, or or as the upset's happening. So I think that's the joy of doing this stuff. Yeah. So the other things that I think create major challenges is a mismatch or a misunderstanding around people's values. So actually, I often say I wonder how any relationships work, because you think about it, you take 2 people from 2 different households, possibly 2 different countries, 2 different cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds, 2 different ways of seeing the world, religion, you add all of that, like places you went to school, languages that you speak. If you add all of those things together, that's the sum total of who we are, what we value. When you put those 2 people together, we expect it to go nicely. And it just doesn't. It doesn't always. Even the best relationships I know, there's differences in values. I think that what the real challenge is not that we have different values, it's that we don't know how to knit them together for both parties to be happy. So what happens is that people then fight their corner so hard and they think the other person is the problem. The problem is we don't know how to knit the relationship together. And that's where we see a lot of challenge, because then what happens is resentment builds and we get louder and more hurt, and then hurt people, and then that's when it just blows up. And then once we're at a place where resentment's stacked to a high point, no one knows how to do this again. Because to do that again kind of means like, oh, but I might be admitting you were right, or I just don't know how to get close to you when you caused me so much hurt. Yeah. And that's usually, I guess, Beck, you probably see that's when they show up to us, when they're at that place. Yeah. And just before you hand over to Beck, so the other 2 things I think, 2 or 3 things actually, is not knowing ourselves or the people we're in relationships very well, and not being curious, like just making a lot of assumptions as well. And so I think there's in being in relationship, we do need to know not just the other person very well, but ourselves well, and know how to communicate who we are into the world. A lot of people don't know how to do that, and feel really angry when they're not understood. Don't always take accountability or responsibility for helping people to understand who they are, but and it is like we all just come from different backgrounds. And then two others that I was going to say here is, one is that happily ever after. We have like almost like this Disney, we call it like the Disney, let's call it the Disney effect, is that we think that it's going to be happily ever after, and if it's not, the relationship's not right. Or that when we get there, like we had this, and all of a sudden stuff happens, we go, but this is not happily ever after, this is hard work. And I am the logic driven person, so it is not, it is hard work, but it can be enjoyable. But it does require energy and time and love and that kind of stuff to knit together a relationship. Yeah. And the other one I would just add is that a lot of the time people think their happiness sits outside themselves, so that another person is going to make them happy, or we even get fooled into thinking in relationships that it's our job to make our partners happy. It's just not. It's the individual's responsibility. And so I see a lot of the time people going, oh, I just want to make you happy. It's like, well, no, your job is to make you happy, their job to make themselves happy. Yeah. So they would be my like top 5.
Okay, awesome.
You nailed it. I think I love the like as you were talking, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I would say. I love when you spoke about curiosity, because it's I feel like I just repeat myself over and over again. I'm just constantly saying to people, even when they're dating, like, be curious, like just try and go from that lens. Don't make assumptions, be curious. Like, curiosity is such an amazing tool in communication. I think the only other thing I would add, and it's so to do with communication, but it's generally, like, I don't know, you tend to get the same sort of clients, but I get a lot of clients who just don't know how to argue well, don't know how to do conflict well, and don't know how to repair that conflict. And it's and I always say to them, like, it's not the conflict, it's the repair of the conflict, because that's when you can come back together and figure out what went wrong and move forward from that, and take it up another level and understand each other. And I'm also constantly saying to people, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because this is not about winning the argument. It's not you two against each other, it's you two against whatever the problem is. Like, take it outside of each other. Like, this doesn't have to be an argument where one of you wins the argument, because then what do you win? You don't win anything, you lose each other along the way. So if you just learn, if people just learn how to have conflict, right? Because conflict is amazing. Like, I love conflict. I think it is like such a key part to a relationship, and I've seen it grow my relationship, because it's helped me understand where my husband comes from and what he's talking about and the way that he sees the world. And if I didn't take the time to say, maybe I'm not right, then I wouldn't learn that, because I'd just be constantly trying to push my idea down his throat.
Yeah, I love that so much. And going back to the conflict a little bit, and the combination with curiosity as well, I think, and I have to say that was one of the biggest issues in my marriage. I did not know how to argue, because my dad was a stonewaller and my mom just took it. And that's what I observed as a kid, or then I observed the screaming matches as well. So, now I obviously know better, and going into a conflict or an argument and saying, okay, let's take a break for 2 seconds and sort of say, okay, this is this is the story that I'm telling myself at the moment. This is, you're attacking me in this way. This is how I feel and how I perceive this conversation. And then we allow the other partner to really get back to us and say, actually, this is not what I intended. This is what I'm trying to say. And it allows for a lot healthier conflict resolution. And again, it's that curiosity, right? You sort of then throw the things at each other in terms of, okay, this is what I feel. No, this is what I meant. And then asking questions, well, how did you mean it? Or things like that. So I think that also helps very much in arguments as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, but you also need, like, it's so important to, like, have that space away, because when you're teaching people how to have good conflict, they just, like, their brain just can't, like, brain goes offline and they're just not in the right space. So I always say, take some time apart and just do not come back together until you're both ready, because otherwise it's going to end up in another argument. You see it all the time. They come back together and then they go, I've got to say my point again, got to get my point right again. You've got to understand me.
Yeah.
And then they just, another argument explodes. So like I literally teach people like, have a break. If it goes into an argument again, have space again, come back again, have space again. Like sometimes it's going to take you 20 times before you can get to that place where you're okay enough to have that conversation that you're talking about. Because that requires a lot of emotional intelligence that unfortunately not everyone has. That's not, you're not born with that.
Yeah. And even in that space, I think as well, like communicating that you need that break in order to come back to a better conflict resolution.
Yep.
Because my ex-husband, he needed that space and I didn't understand it. I was the person that really wanted to solve the problem straight away, and him walking away for me felt like he was ignoring me and the issue. And I just didn't understand. If he would have just communicated better to sort of say, you know, I need this space to get a clear head before I get back to you, you know, maybe I would have understood better. I can't guarantee that I would have, because at that point I was at a very different stage in my personal journey as well. And this whole part of, you know, knowing yourself was a big part of, I didn't know myself when I got into this relationship, into that marriage. I thought I did, but I didn't. So yeah, everything that the two of you said is just, yeah, it so resonated with me and what I have been through in the past. And I'm sure many of the listeners have been in very similar situations as well.
Yeah, such a common pattern.
Yeah, and the what Beck was saying, absolutely on the money around communication. And people often come to us looking to not have to argue ever again. Like, can we have it so we don't? And I go, it's actually, interestingly enough, arguing is a really healthy part of relationships because it allows things to come up to the surface. It's how you do it that counts. And with what you were saying, Beck, absolutely agree that the challenge is not the argument, it's how you heal the argument as well. And it is within the argument how you have the argument. So if we say throwing the bombs and the grenades and, you know, using the weapons of mass destruction, which are threatening the relationship, that's it, I'm done, I'm out. Yeah, that we launched those ones, or we launched the daggers that we know are there. Well, what about when you did this, or 5 years ago? And so it is having some rules. I guess the rules of engagement in an argument are really important as well. And interestingly enough, as you say, Beck, it's probably one of the best things that we do with clients is help them figure that stuff out, because then nothing after that is too difficult, because we know how to argue well, we know how to heal it, we know how to repair and come close together again. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I love
Good
that.
point.
You could do a whole podcast on that, couldn't you?
I know, that would be amazing. And, you know, clients that come and see me, you know, it's often already too late to fix that particular component for those two people, but I can at least, you know, start in doing what you do for them on their own, to really understand all those patterns that they've taken from their childhood, all those the challenges that they have faced in past communication or conflict resolution, and already get them a bit of a head start for the next relationship. So that way they can even sort of say to their new partner moving forward, okay, this is how I like to resolve conflicts, and so on and so forth. And then that way it already leads them to a better start of the relationship. And if they then still come, you know, across similar issues again because they still haven't quite figured it out how to put it into practice, then, you know, then you again come into play, I guess, to an extent as well, or they come back to me, whichever way.
You have got all three, sort of like dating when the relationship is breaking, and then when it's broken, like,
yes,
you know, you've got all phases of it, haven't you?
yes,
all of us. Yeah, good job.
Yeah. Try to make it interesting. And I guess, we sort of touched on that a little bit in terms of observing certain behaviors from our parents or grandparents or other people in our lives. So do you think that is a universal thing? I mean, we sort of said it earlier, but yes, how do you feel about this sort of relationship patterning for people?
Yeah, I think I mean, that's how you learn it. I think Alfina was spot on when she said it in the beginning. Like, that's how you learn those things. Like that, coupled with your attachment that you get in the beginning of life. You only do what you know. Like exactly what you said, Alfina. Like you do what you know, and often I hear clients all the time, if only I did this. I'm like, well, you didn't know that then, so you couldn't have done that then. So there's no point feeling guilty about it. Like when you know what you know, you do better, and then you do better then, you do better then. But yeah, I think you just learn what you learn from your parents or who you've watched have conflict. And it was so interesting when you were talking before, Athena, about conflict and the way that your parents do it. Because I think I either see couples who do that, they either like have a really explosive argument and just like say things they don't mean, do that like I'm going to leave you, like that kind of, throw those grenades and stuff. Or you have people that just don't argue because we just don't want to argue, so we just don't have any conflicts. We just sweep everything under the rug and nothing gets spoken about. And so it's just so interesting, and I think that's where they learnt it from. And I think if people thought about it, they think about the way that they have conflict and the way they communicate, that's where they would have learnt it from.
Yeah, I agree with that, Beck. Interestingly enough, it's even, we look at whether or not you have been raised in an apology culture. So, sorry, or the never say sorry. No, it's your fault. You know, and even that, like, because apologies can heal quite a lot, but some people just have not been raised around it, don't know how to do it well, or do it really badly. Yeah. Jen, the other thing I would say to this is that I agree, absolutely, it's what we've been around. And I think it is what we've seen, but also a big part of it too is those ingredients, those cultural values, the religious values, all of that sort of stuff as well. And then because they're so important to us, or whatever's been normalized, let's say that, because even some toxic and negative behaviors get normalized from very young, and people just go, well, that's how you be, right? And then we fight for those, really, really fight for those. I think it's a lot what we've seen, but then there's those other environmental factors that are just, what become part of who we are as well. And I think what you get exposed to and what age you get exposed to things has a bit of a impact to you, just knowing schools very well and kids very well. Yeah.
Awesome. We sort of touched on that one as well. Alfina, you mentioned stonewalling earlier. And there is this beautiful model of the Gottmans for horsemen and how they can affect your relationships. So maybe because we have 4, if each of you want to maybe explain 2 of them, would that be okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Take your 2 favorite, Alfina.
Oh, look, my stonewalling, you know. As I said, quite the Olympic champion myself in my younger days of that one. Is it okay if I do stonewalling and criticism? Do you like the other 2?
Totally.
Okay.
I don't like any of them, but
that's the challenge.
Yeah, these 2 I find quite interesting. I find them all very interesting. They're all very interesting, but these 2 are quite effective in being destructive. The thing is, it's with these 2, what I tend to find is people are not aware that they're doing this in interesting and unusual ways. So if we go with criticism first and foremost, what's really interesting is a lot of the research and study that I've done around relationships and work that I've done around this is looking at some of those differences between masculine and feminine energy and the way men and women see the world very, very differently. And criticism for women, many of us have this little voice that goes, oh, I should have done that, oh, should have done this, oh, you could have done that better. And then actually use it, depending who you are, but actually, and I noticed this was something for me, particularly, unless I'm very present, this happens, I use criticism to course correct, go, okay, should have done that better, so I go for that next level and that next thing, and okay, next time it's like this. And I use criticism in that way. And without knowing it, the way that I was communicating was all criticism. all criticism. I didn't realize this was actually one of the bigger challenges in my own relationship for the first part of it, was everything that I was saying sounded like criticism to him. I had no idea. I was like, I'm offering helpful suggestions like I do in my coaching business. Like,
I am an educator.
Yes, I shall educate. But I didn't get that what it was being heard, the ears that were listening to it, was just like, I can never do anything right. Yeah. And it's just fascinating. So I remember my husband went through a challenging period in his life. And like, whenever I've gone through challenging periods in my life, I'm like, right, get a coach. Let's go to see a doctor if we need to, go and do this, do this, do this, do this. And he is like, he can do one thing at a time. And he was work on that one thing until it works or it doesn't work. And then he'll look for something else. Whereas I'm like, I take the problem with many things. And I remember going, oh, what if we do this? Or what if we do that? And he's just getting more and more overwhelmed, feeling more and more criticized and shutting down more and more because he just felt like he couldn't do anything right. It's like, what is going on here? And it wasn't until then I listened to what I was saying and I was like, whoa, that's huge. And it actually doesn't work. It doesn't work. It is like a point scoring system, and it's like literally taking energy off somebody. And if you've ever been criticized, you feel it. It's like deflates you. And that's not what you want in a relationship at all. So that looks like obvious criticism when we're being mean, but it can also look not so obvious as well. So I highly recommend people look at that one. The way they do things. I remember one of the antidotes to this is definitely curiosity, right? So I got a little story for you. We were driving, it was a very busy it's a Thursday afternoon at a Westfield in Brisbane, a very busy Westfield in Brisbane. And it was about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon and the car park was empty, but it was going to be soon full, right? Because it gets busy on Thursday night. And it's empty. And the way I would park is, you know how there's two parks, you park nose to nose. Well, I would drive in and drive through with my nose out so I could get out. My husband, he parked beside a wall and a post. And he reverse parked into this place. And I'm like, what? I was like, of course, my tone wasn't my best, people. It was like, oh my God, why are we parking here? It sounded like a fishwife. I swear he nearly had tears in his eyes and he looked at me and goes, I can't do anything right today. Why? What's so wrong with this park? And I go, no, sweetheart, I'm my love of my life. When all the parks are empty, I just park like this. I just don't get, this is the hardest maneuver in the hardest park. He goes, yeah, well, I said, can you just share with me why you've parked here? Like, calm down, be nice and kind in my tone instead of accusing and criticizing. And he said, well, look, if I park here, I know the rest of the car park's empty now, but in about 45 minutes to an hour, this park's going to be full and there's going to be kids, trolleys, prams, all kinds of things that could scratch the car. But if I park beside a wall and a post, no one's going to walk past my car except for the people beside us. And I was like, oh, that's actually really smart. Because he's really focused on protecting the car, right? I'm like, get out easy. He's like, protect the car. See how those different values there work? Yeah. They got a different, now I park the same way because I'm like, yeah, smart man. I'll do that now. And that's that. Massive curiosity can help you with criticism. So the other one, the stonewalling. This is interesting. Stonewalling is actually silent treatment plus an extra element, which is you shut down emotionally as well. So it's not just talking, emotionally you shut down. It's literally putting a stone wall up. And I liken this to it's like you're knocking on the door and nobody's answering. And the louder you knock, you get nothing back. You just hear yourself getting angrier and angrier and angrier. But this is the researchers have proven now this is way more damaging than actually shouting at each other. It can have people triggered quite badly in terms of not being heard, not being seen, not feeling valuable. It can be really destructive in a relationship. Having said that, sometimes, as Beck mentioned, the silent treatment is something that I say to people in very small doses works really well. because we do sometimes need to stop talking. Because talking's not getting us anywhere good. We need to stop. That doesn't mean we give someone the silent treatment. It just means that we take a moment and take some time out. The other thing that I want to say on this is that with the silent treatment, it was also for people, helpful people to know, is the reason most of the time, the reason people do this is because they are following the theory, if I got nothing nice to say nothing. And if I don't know what to say, I'm going to say nothing. And I don't want to make things worse, so I'm going to say nothing. So sometimes that comes from the most amazing place of love and fear all at the same time. And for someone who's a big communicator, like Jen, you were saying, you like to get things done. Just like stop, just let's get it out. This can be really hard to deal with, but sometimes it's done to not make things worse. The challenge, as you would know, as you said, Beck, before, is that people don't come back and heal that, what they did in creating that silent treatment. Yeah. So
and I had a client the other night that it was the exact thing. He said, I said, why can you tell me why you go silent? He said, I go silent because I just don't know the right thing to say, and I know nothing I say is going to be right. And she just perceived it as though, you're ignoring me. I want to be heard. Like, we need to talk about this. And he's like, there's nothing I can say that's going to make this any better, so I'm just not going to say anything. So their constant cycle of arguing was that, her wanting to get it out, but she probably had criticism in there, so making him feel like he's not heard. He's like, I just can't say the right thing, and I don't want to make it worse, so I just won't say anything. And it was just not getting anywhere. Like, no one's feeling heard. So it's just so interesting, because those two go so well together. Hey, not really. You don't want them, but that's how they match.
If you want to set a torch to a relationship.
It's crazy how common all of these are, though. Sorry, Jen, what were you going to say?
No, you're right. And I was definitely in the boat, like not feeling heard, not feeling seen, and that came from other things from my past as a child. But I then just fell, and I saw it as a form of punishment as well, because it was used on me to punish me as well. So I really, really struggled with that, and I was definitely the person that just got louder and louder and got so frustrated with it. And I'm definitely not proud of it, but knowing now what I know now is, just let it go for a little bit, have that conversation, and then come back together. So, but I can so relate to the things that you were just saying.
And you said something really important there, Jen, which was it was used as a form of punishment. Yes. And that's the heartache. We can always feel it in your body. Okay,
the other two are defensiveness and contempt. And defensiveness, I find, is used a lot. And again, I suppose, like criticism, it's not really like that. They're probably not that aware of it, and I find that can be coupled with criticism as well. So defensiveness is like, I've said something to, and you're like, no, that didn't happen. Or I find in couples, women say, this is often women say, you always do this, or you never do this, and the male brain goes, that's not true, not quite true. Last week I did it, so that's that's not a real fact. And so the automatic defensiveness comes up of, I'm not going to hear you because I'm just defensive in the way that I argue about it. And like all of them, you just get nowhere with these, because you just like, it's almost like those brick walls go up and you're never going to get through them if you hold those stances. And contempt, I find, probably one of the most damaging, along with stonewalling, because it's the insult or abusiveness or attack on someone's personal character. And it just can be nasty, like really nasty. And I think that once you get to that stage of arguing, sometimes there's no coming back from that, because you've said it's like those grenades or bombs that you were talking about. You just drop things that a person can't unhear, and the hurt caused from those things is just so dangerous. And there's a really good, if people haven't heard of these, go watch on, if you Google the Four Horsemen Gottman, just make sure you include Gottman, because otherwise you get all these other things. There's a really good little clip on these, and it explains it really well. It's a little cartoon video. It explains them and the antidotes to them really well. But just be aware, like these, like even just in like having one of these things in your relationship will do so much damage. So like, just be aware that this is what you can do to change things, you know, just shifting one of these things and noticing these behaviors.
Yeah, Beck, I think sometimes with defensiveness, what I notice too is I think our fight, flight, freeze, whatever responses get triggered, and it's if I'm feeling attacked, I'm going to attack back. That's my mechanism. That's how I do it. Or I'm going to say nothing back and go quiet or freeze. Yeah. So we see these can be patternized in people. They can be strategies we've learnt to use along the way to de-escalate things for a period of time as well.
I think we think they're helpful, like lots of things we do. Hey, like you do these things because you think at some level they're going to work or help, or they've got some benefit there, but don't realize the damage that they cause as well, particularly if repeated, like you're saying. Yeah.
I think the language in especially that sort of defensiveness bit that you were mentioning, like always or never, I think that's an essential bit as well, the language that we use with that, because always, it just means always. There is no exception to the rule. Same with never. And I think when we change the language on that as well, and again, go differently into an argument, it can just change the whole dynamic so much to be so much more productive.
Yeah, totally. And I think if you don't have the lens on, I've got to win this, then you won't use those words, because they're used to be like, I'm going to win my argument because you always do this. And therefore, if I say that, there's no room to wiggle. There's no room to move there. But if you look at the actual facts of what's going on, that's not true.
Yeah. We call them hooks. They like hook you and grab you. And I always say that people's eyes start to twitch. There it is. You know it's coming. There's the bomb. There's the thing. Yeah. And you see it and you can feel it in your body too, can't you? Like feel it start to rise up through your body.
Yeah. So I have two more questions for you. So what do you think people can do to save their relationship, and when do you think it's too late and better to separate? I know that's sort of a little bit of a challenging question, because obviously we do not want to break people up or anything like that, but sometimes it's just healthier to go separate ways, especially when children are involved, I guess, as well, because children, again, observe the pattern of the parents. And so what do you think people can do? What are some things?
Come see us.
Good one. I like that.
I think they have to be willing to try it. Like, you have to be willing to want things to work, and both of you. Like, I met a couple the other week, and sometimes I've had this pattern of couples coming to me to go, should we separate or should we stay together? Like, we're not sure. We're at this stage where we're like, oh, I don't know what to do. So we want to come to someone to get to work on this. And I always say to people, like, let's get you, particularly if you've got kids, let's get you to a 10 out of 10 relationship, regardless of whether you stay together or not, because you have to be able to work together with the children afterwards, and you want to still have a good relationship in that way. So I think I honestly, like, when I said see us, it's kind of a joke, but like, you should get support, because you've used all the tools you know how to use. You don't really, like, where else are you going to learn them from? You need someone to hold you accountable. You need someone to look at what's going wrong from an outsider perspective and see, like, these are little things. And sometimes they are little things. It might seem massive to you, but it might be the tiniest shift in your relationship that makes all the difference. And when do I think it should end? Probably, like, one, if there's any violence, any domestic family violence there, absolutely. But two, I think if you've gotten to that point where you feel defeated or feel like there's nothing left that you can do, either of you, or there's like, I still think there's always a chance to work through things if you guys want to, and if there's, you know, with the caveat of domestic family violence. What about you, Alfina?
This is a really difficult question, because when I first started these, this type of work, especially in relationships, you kind of want everyone to be able to be together if they want to be together. And then some people are just not meant to be in a romantic relationship. They're better friends or co-parenting. It is a really difficult one. As a coach, we can never say, or even a counsellors or therapists in this area can never say, you guys really need to separate. There's really got to be the decision of the individuals. But there's definitely times where you go, you're not in this. The commitment's gone, the trust is gone. And they would be the pillars that hold the relationship up. So when people come in saying, I just don't love this person anymore, they're not committed. They're not 100% in. They're not choosing the relationship. And when I often say to people, you can make a shift in relationships if you've got just one person. But if the other person doesn't think there's a problem, you can do a whole heap around that. No worries. Things can shift working with one person. But if that person knows there's a problem and won't do anything about it, won't seek help, you can put as much joy and love into a situation and, you know, change your communication. And if the other, like if both parties aren't committed to it, then it's time. But yeah, when trust and commitment are gone, that's probably the moment. If you don't have either of those, they're like they are the literal foundations of a relationship. So they're gone. What was the other part of the question, Jen? It was that what can you do to save it? What would you do to save it? Yeah, this is interesting. My colleague and I work with another woman, and it's choose the relationship. That's how you save it. You choose your relationships. Relationships are a choice. You keep choosing them. So is what I'm going to say going to move me closer to the person or move me further away? Is what we're doing taking us to where we want to go or further away from where we want to go? And it's just literally, it's a simple choice. All of the strategies that Beck and I teach and yourself, Jen, all those things, yes, you need them. You need new information. You need education. The most simple strategy is to choose. People have got to choose their relationship. 100%. So we've had some clients tell us, I thought I was choosing the relationship, but it was conditional. I'm only choosing it if that person changes, if they get better, if they stop doing that. So it's like this, that's not 100% choosing. That's like until. I'll choose it until, or I'll choose it if. Yeah.
I saw this guy speak once, and he said a really good analogy that was like this. He told the story about how he proposed to his partner, and they climbed to Mount Everest, and he got to the top, and then he got down on one knee, and imagine he said, "I'm 97% sure I want to marry you." Like, can you imagine what the woman would say? She'd be like, I'm not really sure. Like, you have to be 100% in, right? So it's the same thing. Like, it's just so interesting if people were like, yeah, I think I'm there, but there's still 3% of me that's just not quite sure you're the one.
What's that 3%? Like, most people's brain goes, what is that?
Yeah, exactly.
That was my brain, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. That's a great one, Beck. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I liked how you were saying, obviously we would never tell our clients that it's probably better to separate. We would always ask them certain questions to find the answer themselves, but also not probing in a way to stir them in a particular way. But absolutely, I think as soon as one of them is not 100% in, it is just not going to last. So it's going to be over at one point. Yeah.
No, interestingly enough, most relationships are over way before people leave them.
Yeah.
So some statistics tell us that women leave them emotionally a year to 2 before they actually physically leave them. Some people don't realise until a year later the person's left of, oh, we had problems. Yeah, they didn't realise. They can't fathom what it was that was wrong or what they did wrong. Yeah.
It's I think I was speaking to someone. I did a podcast on Friday and I was talking about this. It's like when I got healthy, I didn't know before that what it was like to feel healthy. Like I just didn't know what it was like to feel in my body. And I think relationships are until you kind of know what it's like to have a really good relationship. I think sometimes we just settle for this mediocrity because we think that's how relationships should be.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I don't know. That's why it's so cool to work with people and see the shifts and have them go, wow, this is really good. And it can be really good. And we can have hard times. It can still be really good. Like, it's just a cool place to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Now, last question for you ladies. Do you have any suggestions on how to set up a mature and conscious conversation around either working on a relationship or, the potential separation? But probably let's try focus on repairing the relationship. Like what can the conversations be when you realize you're unhappy and you're not too sure where things are going? How can you address it with your partner to then go and see someone like a counselor, psychologist, or one of us?
I think you have to be honest. Like if you're I think you just have to get the cards on the table. I practice I statements, which is such a simple thing with clients, like us constantly, because if you can take responsibility for how you're feeling and communicate that with someone. So I would always start the conversation, well, prior to talking, to understanding where you're at and what you want. And then communicate that by taking ownership of how you're feeling, not saying the other person is making you feel anything or that they're making you do anything. But then being able to communicate what you're wanting it to be like it's your hope. Like, what is your intention of the conversation? Where do you want this relationship to go? What is your hope by talking to your partner about this? And try and keep it positive, I suppose. Like, if you're wanting it to work, like, this is where I see us going, but right now I feel stuck because of this or this. But I think you have to be honest with yourself and with them about how you're feeling and what's going on.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This is a really good question, Jen, because we have people who often want to come and do the relationship reset, and they say, but my partner doesn't think we have a problem, and they don't. And when they bring it up, the way that it's brought up some of the time, there's defensiveness immediately because because they immediately think, oh, I'm the problem, or there's something wrong, or there's something wrong with me. And so it does have to be brought up gently and definitely from a place of where you want to head rather than where you've been. So I just want us to get some new, I'm struggling and I don't know what to do different. I really would love us to get some new strategies, something different to help us. Most of the time when people are rational and reasonable to communicate with, they get that. It can be an interesting struggle though to have that conversation. Let's get some help, because sometimes people don't want to admit there's a problem, or don't even think there's a problem.
I want to point out something really important that you just said though, because people might not have heard that when you said we and us, like rather than you need to get help, or you made it part of the collective that the partnership needs to get help together, and it's no one's fault. And I think that's really important because that is the aim. And you'll get the best result out of that.
Well, ideally you have two people in a relationship, right? Because otherwise you don't really have a relationship in that way anyways. But also what you were saying earlier back is the I statements. I feel like this. So, it's no one else's fault necessarily that I feel like that, because a statement can make me feel in a particular way because it triggers something from the past, even if it wasn't intended that way. So it's not the other person's fault that I am triggered. So the I statements are definitely essential, I think, in that one as well. And so, and sort of saying, I feel like this, and that's why I think we could benefit from X, Y, Z.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great.
All right, ladies. Well, that is all the questions I had for you today. But is there anything you feel that we've missed, or that you think we should add to today's episode, or that our listeners should be aware of?
Well, I think we've covered so much. I think if we add any more information to your brains, you'll probably explode. There's a million different directions we could have gone or taken this. And I think there's some really helpful tips in there. And just know that you don't have to implement it all at once. Like pick one thing that you've got from this and implement it if you're struggling. Like you don't have to take on everything.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'd add, Jen, is a message of hope. That's it. There's if there are people that are struggling, if Beck, myself, and Jen can give you anything, it's a symbol of hope that we've all had challenging relationships. We've all seen a lot of stuff come back from the brink of disaster. They're on the brink of disaster, and that if we can be a message of hope at all, there is information out there. There are different strategies. There are people that, because I think there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around talking about relationships, and so if you find the right people, we can bring some hope and some life or a spark back in you and then back into the relationship. And that's the only thing I'd add. Find that hope.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks again so much, ladies. I think we have covered some amazing ground today. Lots of golden nuggets in that conversation. And yeah, as you were saying, if you can only implement one thing, do it. You don't have to do all of it together. What I will do is I will pop both of your details into the show notes as well. And on top of that, I will actually put some details in there as well for women or men that can need some support through domestic violence relationships. So I'll pop some of those details into the show notes as well. All right, well, thank you so much, ladies, and I hope I get to chat to you again soon.
Amazing. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.
Bye.
If you decide you would like to work with me or would like to know a little bit more about what I do, reach out via call or message and book your 30-minute complimentary breakthrough session either through my website, createagain.com.au, my Instagram @createagain, or on Facebook @createagaincoach. I also have a private Facebook group which provides a safe space and gives you the opportunity to connect with other people that have been through a similar journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends, like, comment, and share. I'm so grateful that you have listened today and hope to welcome you back next week. Thank you.